Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
In today's JobSync Roundtable audio, the rise of RecOps, strategies for securing initial funding and hiring your first RecOps expert. RecOps stands for Recruiting Operations. You're going to hear from James Colino. He's an author. Nona Renfro, Leah Daniels, and Alex Murphy at JobSync. Author and industry expert James Colino, and hiring operations and D&I thought leader Nona Renfro on securing funding and hiring your first recruiting operations expert. James leads recruitment operations for Sheets and literally wrote the book on RecOps. Nona has been an executive advisor for critical talent transformation initiatives at companies like Amazon and Google Fiber. Enjoy the audio.
And today's topic is so it's something I'm super interested in. I think it's a little bit of a niche topic today, but more and more organizations are starting to build out a recruiting operations function. And while it sounds good when you say it out loud, it's not as simple as saying, let's just do it. Let's have one. It actually requires some thought, business cases, process, funding, and then selection. Who's going to hire? Who are you going to hire first? So today's topic is really about that concept and how to go about building that. So a couple housekeeping items. You guys, your cameras are hot, your mics are hot. Actually, feel free to jump on camera and join the conversation and be part of this with us. Feel free to jump in if you have questions or you want to contribute some of your own thoughts to our topic today. My name is Leah Daniels. I will be one of your hosts today. I lead commercial operations here at JobSync. And JobSync is a hiring operations platform. We are focused on top of funnel optimization, really helping our customers deliver 2, 3, 4, 5x in value and in candidate volume, allowing the companies to then optimize down funnel and do some really cool things. With me today, I have Alex Murphy, our CEO, and I'm going to have both James Colino and Nona both introduce themselves. There are two featured speakers today. So James, I'm going to have you go first, give us a little bit of background, and then we'll jump in to our questions.
Sure. What's up, everyone? So James Colino, my background, last 20 years, I've really lived at the intersection of recruiting leadership at relatively large companies like Pfizer and the Hershey Company and Sheets, where I'm at today. And the other intersection of my career has been around technology enablement and founding software companies in the recruiting space. So kind of an odd background, but just wanted to give you that context there. In the last decade, I've held a couple recruiting leadership roles, founded, grew, and sold a interview software company, led technology enablement at Cielo, and somewhere in between all there, managed to write a book called RecOps. And so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So really looking forward to the conversation today. Nona?
Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. I'm Nona Renfro. I got into the TA space back in 2006. Prior to that, I was a product manager in the business for about 5 years. So I've been in TA for about 15 years. I've had just such a great opportunities to work for companies like Meta, G-Fiber, Amazon, PayPal, and a few others. And really, I've seen the TA landscape in all areas, from high volume to executive. And it's been a fun journey, really watching how TA has evolved. And we were all recruiting and then became talent acquisition. So I'm really excited to be here today. Super passionate about just operations overall for recruiting, and excited to share with you guys today.
Awesome. Two more things. We are recording today, so there'll be a recording of this available afterwards. And we like to say there are two conversations happening, obviously the one on the screen and that we're all having together, but also over in the chat. So please feel free to jump in and participate there as well. We'll try to keep an eye on any questions or comments that come out through the chat as well. So with that as our starting place, let's just jump in. I think the first really big question I want to put on the table is, why do we need recruiting operations? Hiring operations, talent acquisition operations, talent attraction operations, pick your flavor. Why do we need it?
Yeah, I'll go first. For me, I think, operations is the backbone of TA. We need it to help our recruiters, to enable them to make sure that they have all the tools in the toolkit that they need to be successful. It helps us tell the story to the business. So it's not just, their perception. We actually have the reality of how we're doing. James?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think I'll go a little bit more tactical there and say that sometimes, when your company has ambitions to grow, for example, and that growth involves the acquisition of talent at scale, you can't afford to have bottlenecks, in the recruiting process. You don't want to be the person that's holding back growth. So I think in specific instances inside of some companies, it demands, the need for a function or a person who can optimize all parts of the recruiting process. Sometimes you have like complexity too in a business. I'm sure, Nona, you said you worked for Meta and I think Google. Like those are big, complex, globally distributed companies that probably had multiple ATSs. And so in that type of environment, you need somebody who can make sense of it all and link it all together.
I would say that one of the things that we see a lot of are before you actually introduce this function, part of the challenge with operations is it's everyone's job. So it's no one's job, right? So everybody has bits and pieces, things that they might be interested in or find like really irritating. So they're going to work on it because like it's a problem for them. It's really a little more personal passion than it is sort of a cohesive thought process and strategy, right? So like I really hate, I don't know, setting up interviews. Let's go find an automated interview scheduler because that's cool and that will save us time and I'm excited about it. So I'm going to go pursue that option. And not to say that's a good or a bad solution, simply that is one little piece of a very long funnel of activity that's going to be tackled, but not always at the right time, right? Like if you're optimizing this one piece and you're only spending, I don't know, 20 minutes a week on it, is that where the business should be spending time optimizing, right? And I think when you have this, no one owns it, everybody owns it, you end up with this scattershot approach to solving your operational problem. So, when you're thinking about the business and the need for this kind of role, when I heard complexity is one of them, but when do you need it? Is it when you have a certain number of roles? Is it when you have 2 ATSs? Is it when you hit a global marker? What are the markers in a business that start to give you indication you need to start to consider a function like this?
I can give you maybe a current perspective. I tend to think that it's usually a strategic thing. So the business is asking you to do something, and you have to look at your function and ask the question: are we set up to deliver what the business or business leaders want us to do? So at my company where I'm at now, Sheets, we're a convenience retailer. We've got 730 stores on the East Coast. And when I came on, the CEO said, we know how to build stores. We have 500 of them at the time. We know how to build stores. We know how to find the land. We know how to staff them. So we're gonna build them faster, 3 times faster. And we're gonna go from 500 stores to 1,000. And so when I looked at my function, I quickly realized I'm under-resourced. I don't have the right tech stack. My processes, can't scale, to that degree. So for me, it's less about like maybe a metric indicator. It's more of what is the business asking me to do and can I deliver on it?
Yeah.
Nona, you do a lot of consulting for this kind of thing. So it's actually a really great question for you.
Yeah. And it's I've seen so many different scenarios, and I think it depends on where you're at as a company, the size of the company. But a couple areas that I've ran into quite often is when you have recruiting teams doing operations off the side of their desk. It's very quickly impacting their ability to produce because they're trying to be a producer and deliver hires, plus run all the scheduling, say, as a coordinator. So they're doing operational functions, logistics off the side of their desk, and it can fall apart. And what happens is you very quickly see it impacts candidate experience, hiring manager experience, and a recruiter's experience. There's a high level of frustration because they feel like I have to do this because I don't have the support to do it. I'm trying to do 10 different things and fill jobs. So that's one scenario. Another scenario is just looking at what is the impact of the tool? Like, is the tool the right thing for the organization? Is the workflow right? Really calibrating the overall experience that you want everyone to have operationally from all the tools and the systems, looking at how your recruiters are spending their time. So in the bigger engines that I've been a part of, some of the big things is the recruiters can get distracted and they have so many tools, and then suddenly they're not using the right tools or not using them at all. And you've had all this investment in dollars to provide all this, but it's not being used or tracked. And so it's just not efficient. And so that's when you look at really calibrating what your desired experience is to decide, is it time to either fix the operations or bring in someone to lead it? Because sometimes you have an existing team, but you need to spend time with them fixing things to really make them efficient. And at other times you have to build something that you've never had before.
I'd say one of the things that we see from a technology standpoint is that companies acquire technology. I think I was in a room at Indeed maybe last year, and they asked at the Indeed conference, and they asked, how many tools do you use for top of funnel? And everybody raise your hand at one. Now lower your hand as I say the number. And they didn't get to stop until they hit 17. So there was a company with 17 top of funnel tools. That's a lot. And the challenge is that's probably nothing if they're all integrated beautifully and you only have to log into one of them and they all work.
But they don't. Yeah.
This is a challenge.
Yeah, I think I know which company that is as well.
Oh, you've met them. But it's a problem we have in the space overall, is that things don't talk to each other on top of it, as if we don't have enough things going on. Now we have a lot of walled garden type talent solutions that don't play nicely in the sandbox with other solutions. And we're solving our problem by adding more to the tech stack. But if it's an unintegrated solution, have we actually solved for it? And I think part of that is actually because as buyers, right, we buy, this is Alex's favorite term, we buy with urgency, right? This urgency bias to buy things to solve our problems. And we don't know how to vet through, like, is it going to operationally scale out to our business? And I think that's an interesting skill set, right? That isn't always innate in your recruiting team, right? Because that isn't really what you're hiring for when you're hiring recruiters and recruiting leaders. You're not looking for them to say, do you know how to operationally make your tech stack work better together too?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think James probably can add to what I'm about to say, but many times I've seen you have the wrong decision makers at the table selecting tools. You have people that aren't in the trenches and understand recruiting. So what looks good for them doesn't actually work in the day-to-day life of a recruiter, of a recruiting leader. So you have the wrong decision makers at the table picking these tools, and you have all the vendors who are great salespeople. So it sounds great, but if you don't have the right decision makers making those selections, that's where you get in trouble. James, I'll let you.
Yeah, my favorite example of that is, when the business is going with SAP and, you just get success factors by default, or HR is going with UKG and you get UKG ATS, as a result. So very much aligned with that as a problem.
That's interesting. So we're sort of thinking through this process. We recognize that, the first step to fixing a problem is admitting you have one. The next question is, how do you get everyone else to admit you have a problem, right? So recruiting, it's always been done this way. It's my favorite thing. Well, we've always done it this way. Just keep doing it. It works this way, it's fine. How do you start to build consensus and a business case internally? How do you get the leadership of not necessarily recruiting, because oftentimes recruiting leadership is like, yeah, I see the problem. How do we get the business to say, let's go and fund a solution. Let's figure out how to put a person who's solely dedicated to thinking about this challenge of the people pipeline.
So Nona, you want me to take that one first?
Yeah, you can go first. Yeah, I've been
Okay.
Tom Man a lot first, so I'll let you go first.
That's okay. So, I've just found over time that the business understands the business language. And, sometimes in talent acquisition and HR, we speak our own speak, and it makes no sense to anyone else. So I think, as a first step, one of the most important things is to understand, what the business strategy is, understand what leaders want. So, it's usually the work of a new leader when they first come in to go around and do a listening exercise. And so capturing, problems that exist in the business by asking leaders, like, if you were me, what would you focus on first? Or what feels like it's broken in the hiring process? And so when you kind of take those things and you analyze them, and you go back and talk to your team and you look for the gaps between what the business is asking for and what you guys can actually do, then you can go back to them and say, okay, this is what I heard you say. These are the problems that I heard. Here are all the projects that would sort of lead up to or ladder up to us fixing this. And oh, by the way, all of my recruiters are, fully utilized and on a desk, and they, they're not going to be able to run these projects. So if you want me to take this, this current state where we are today and get it to this future state, I'm going to need some sort of, I'm going to need some help to do it. I don't know that I would necessarily lead with, we need a RecOps person, because they probably won't understand that unless you share, with them. If you're in a production environment, for example, you could say it's like a Six Sigma person but for recruiting, or in DevOps, it's like a DevOps person, but in recruiting. And so the more you can talk their language, show them their problems through their eyes, and show them the gaps and how you intend to get there, through a compelling vision, that tends to work a lot better than just saying, hey, I need to implement some stuff and improve things, because everybody needs to improve things.
Looking for your next HR technology role? Go to your browser, type in hrtechjob.com, and browse hundreds of jobs with the best HR technology vendors. HR tech professionals finally have a dedicated job marketplace to find work or be found. Sign up for job alerts or post a resume. Discover jobs with companies like Workday, Phenom, HiBob, Deal, and more. You'll even find HR tech roles with employers in case you want to work with managing HCM or HRIS platforms. HR Tech Job, the only job market for HR technology careers. Join us at hrtechjob.com.
Before we got on, we were talking about the variety of ways people describe quality of hire or define quality of hire. And Nona, as you were kind of walking through the various different people's experiences and the breakdown that happens for all sorts of reasons, I kind of jokingly put in, people need an operations team when you get Workday, because you do. From an outcomes perspective, just to tie and connect the dots with what you were just saying, James, when somebody says, I need the candidate experience to be better, everybody says, sure, but kind of so what, right? What are the business outcomes? And sometimes it's translated, or, a common place to talk about it is quality of hire, but what are the downstream outcomes that affect the business that the operations team should probably be focused first on as it's related to generalized business outcomes?
I think, for me, when I go into the business to really position and really influence, it's helping, because the business leaders always want to know, why do you want to do this and what value is it for me? Is being able to go in and tell them that story of the why that we're going to do this, show them data, walk them through what's happening throughout the funnel, where the roadblocks are, being able to show them the gaps, and then the value that this change or this investment will bring to this cycle or whatever's happening. And I think, from a business perspective, they want it really concise, buttoned up, very data driven, so they can understand, okay, if we invest here, this is what we're going to expect in the next 3 months, 6 months, 2 years from now. So, I always go in very solution oriented to giving them a solution and influencing them of why this is going to help the recruiting org hire better talent. I don't focus on faster because that is really sticky in all the different levels and role types and things like that, but hire better quality that's focused on retention. And James had mentioned this about Six Sigma. I am really a champion for Gemba walks. So that's a Six Sigma process where you go in and you do a study of the function from A to Z and look for areas of waste, look for areas of improvement. And that type of data can also help tell your story. So you have your metrics and your KPIs, but then also the story that you collect through a Gemba walk where you hear from users, hiring managers, recruiters, like things that are failing, things that are working well. And you suddenly have this big picture to be able to position to the business to gain their buy-in for investing in tools or resources.
One of the things that we have seen with some of the companies we work with is measuring things outside of recruiting as part of these arguments, right? I think this is one of these less natural, but what is the cost of overtime if you don't hire a person? A big one for the business if you're an hourly workforce and you have to bring in overtime, or temp workers, or a staffing firm, right? Another one we see frequently is if you can measure the output in a certain period of time, and if the hire is taking, 100 days, and it could instead take 40 days, what is the cost or the value to the business for those additional 60 days? So really understanding the business numbers and not just the recruiting numbers, because we often see metrics and cost metrics in particular that are like, we saved in recruiting X number of dollars because we didn't renew this contract, or we did this instead, or whatever it might be. And it's almost an isolating metric in that you sort of view the world when it ends at the hire instead of viewing the world as the business impact. So I think you guys are coming at it the same sort of concept. Is like you have to take that time and understand your business. It's not recruiting ends on the day you get that piece of paper and they said yes, right? It's really about the rest of that organization. And the overtime one in particular strikes me because we've found with a lot of our companies that we work with that this can result in millions and millions of dollars for the business when you start to add it up, because overtime at scale is expensive.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to them. And also, even for your recruiters, as anytime you go through stuff like this, there's a lot of change management, and recruiters sometimes aren't on board with new tools or systems or changes in that. And even educating them on the cost, what it costs a business every day that you don't have a hire. So, in some situations, it can be, if you don't fill this call center job, it's, $30,000 a day that the business loses for this one person. Like helping the recruiting team also understand their role and why having better tools and systems and workflows, which, sometimes it can be a pain, is important.
I'm curious, is that part of the intake process for most recruiters when they sit down with the hiring manager to say, what is the business value that this role or these roles will produce?
It should be, but it's not always. It's really, many times it's just about collecting information about the role, getting to know the hiring manager, what the process is going to be like, understanding what that person that they hire will be doing, but they don't focus as much on, and really it's just not something that's standard, is what is the loss to the business every day this position isn't filled? Those are usually just not conversations that the recruiters have. And it's not because they don't want to, it's just not part of their format. And that's where I think recruiting operations can really come in and build those type, put together a matrix that will help recruiters understand for the job families they recruit for. That's where an operations team can put together that data, so a recruiter will have it going into the intake versus having to ask about it.
I can imagine if it's asked the wrong way, it would make the hiring manager defensive and then reinforces not asking that question again.
Yeah.
What do you think from a business pushback perspective? So you're going to go to a business and say, we need some support. Here's my business case. As all good CFOs will go, that costs money. That's a no. Now tell me why I should say yes. Like, what should people anticipate? What should we be thinking about are the reasons that a business is going to say no? Because obviously the first one's going to be no budget. Obviously, it's always no budget. But beyond that, like, how do we prepare for pushback, and what sort of data should we be arming ourselves with before we go and have these conversations?
Yeah, for me, I think too that I've routinely been challenged with is, why don't you just leverage other people in the business? So if you're going to do an analytics project and that's part of the scope of what you're trying to remediate, just use the BI team. If it's a marketing problem, just use the marketing team. And then so go try and talk to the marketing team and the BI team and see if they have bandwidth, right? And they don't, because they're fully utilized. So you have to be ready to have already had those conversations with those other teams. Just sort of validate, hey, I already talked to our chief data officer, I already talked to our chief marketing officer. And then the other one is, when you think about RecOps through the lens of continuous improvement, a lot of leaders will say, well, you want to bring this person in to do these projects. What about when these projects are done? What are they going to do? And so that's just really where it becomes important for you as a leader to have like a really strong talent acquisition strategy, a vision, and then I call it an action plan, which is nothing more than a spreadsheet with a bunch of projects and roadmap items that I want to get to someday, so that you can say, look, yes, I want to bring this person in specifically to help us with this ATS implementation, but here's like 65 other things that the business told me that they want, as well. And, we can get to all these things much faster while not bothering the core recruiting team if we had somebody dedicated to it.
I have two thoughts just to put out to you guys. So first, we talked to Nona Cheval at UBS last year. She did a whole session around schooling the C-suite. So actually how to craft your argument, how to socialize it ahead of time, right? Make sure you've had all the one-on-ones so you've got all the pushback before you walk into the boardroom and make a request. If anyone's interested in that, either the reporting or the white paper on it, let me know. Happy to provide that for you. The second thing that I was thinking about, and James, Nona, you guys tell me if I'm, because I've not done this before, so this is not in my experience. I would assume, always a dangerous word, that by an organization's size of getting to a complexity level where you might be looking at an operations function, you probably do have operations inside some of your other organizations. Maybe it's in your RevOps, maybe it's in marketing ops, maybe it's in DevOps. There's probably a functional specific operations, not just the overarching operations function. Is it reasonable to walk over to the leader of that or that org and say, how did you go about getting this particular role filled? How did you get started? What worked in our organization that made this an easier transition for the business? Is that completely crazy, or is that like a really good template because each company is a little bit different?
No, it's really good. And I think that's something that you always want to lean into fellow organizations that can be a champion for you. Like sales ops is a big one. When I'm positioning to do something that I need to go ask for funding and investment from the C-levels, I work really closely with other organizations like sales ops, with DevOps, HRIS, to really get them to also be a champion, understand how they presented this, and then work directly with the business leader. One way to that I found successful, especially in smaller environments, startup to mid-size, where there's really no funding, is partnering with a business leader in an area maybe that you're really struggling in to fill roles, and have them help with the funding. A lot of times they'll say, you can go and present the tool. Here's the why, here's the value. Recruiting doesn't have a budget. Would you be willing to fund this for a 6-month pilot? And so you really find these champions from within the business, as well as, you're having all the conversations with other stakeholders before you take it to your decision makers. And it is so helpful to have those people in your corner, understand how they've been successful, but then also have them champion you from not only implementing a tool or a system, but also having them help fund it when you're in a situation where there's no budget within TA. And I know there's many of you on the call today that have that situation. Is the business always has budget typically to fund costs from TA, and our costs are so much lower than what the business has to think about. So if you ask them for $50,000 to run a 6-month pilot, for them that's really not a big chunk of money out of their budget. But it is, to your question, Leah, so important to also talk to your peers that are running operations teams as well.
James, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think it's perfectly said. The only other thing I would add is that when you're going in to pitch your needs and what you want to do, I think it's good to have a backup plan, maybe 2 or 3 of them. So if you're ideally going in and saying, I want a RecOps leader or a RecOps specialist, for example, if the answer to headcount is no, which at a lot of companies it typically is, there might be an opportunity for a chunk of money, some funding, to hire someone like Nona, or to hire a contractor, for example, or a temp who's not exactly a full-time headcount. So you want to kind of think of it in those terms as well.
When you're starting to, let's say magic happens, business says yes, celebrations have occurred. You've written the job description. Who's the first hire? Who are you bringing into the organization? Is it a part-time consultant to help get started? Is it a promotion from somebody internally who just seems to be really interested and smart? Is it somebody that that you've worked with in the past and you want to bring them in because you want to get a good baseline? Where are you starting with that first hire? How do you decide which of those 10 different options that I just said is the right kind of person for your business?
I'll
go ahead.
I'll
go
with,
ahead,
I'm
James.
sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead, James.
I was going to say, I will go with the it depends answer. It really depends what your situation is. What is your funding environment? How bad are things? What's the business strategy? But I would be in favor of something that I think Nona was alluding to earlier. She was talking about like aligning stakeholders and people within the business. And I would also say like outside of the business as well. You should probably be thinking about building a RecOps ecosystem, an ecosystem of partners, an ecosystem of resources that can help you along your journey. And from there, you can figure out like, what is your first hire? If you put a gun to my head and it's a perfect world, I'm in favor of like the head of talent acquisition in a reasonably large size company should be able to set the strategy and bring on someone who's more of like a senior specialist level to do the tactical work and to build the credibility of the function, to show some results, and then from there, build out potentially and either promoting that person to the leader or bringing on a leader if your intentions are to build it a little bit larger. Nona, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say it definitely depends on your environment. I've been in environments where I've had, potential staff that I could promote. They had the skills, the aptitude, past experiences. I think it's important, knowing your organization from a talent review perspective, because sometimes you'll have people in there that were recruiting ops at another company and now they're doing, business intelligence, or they're doing recruiting and sourcing. So looking within your org depending on the size. Internally, there might be people from the HRIS operations team that have an interest, they have the operational background. But if you're in a small company, and I have an example, and I'm going to call someone out here that's on the podcast, when you're in a very small company of about 600 people, there's no functions, within your team that there isn't that talent existing. In my situation at Google Fiber, I said I need to hire a recruiting operations leader, like the very first thing. I need them to come in, build this out, help us, select the systems and tools. And so I hired Ben Aber, who was on the call. And Ben, sorry about calling you out, but he's on here. And that was something for me because of the size of the company. I needed someone that I knew could come in and hit the ground running with that operational rigor and experience and analytics minded that could then come build it with me. And then over time, we built that team out. So I think it will depend on where you're at. But to James's, point, that the TA leader really will define that strategy and what works best for the size of organization that they have. And Ben has been a rock star at Google Fiber and helped me build the entire function from ground up.
Nona, you said sometimes you can look around and see people internally that have the skills. What are the defining skills, would you say? Are there, I know it's going to depend. That's like the
right. Answer. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But there's a couple of things that we're really looking for, right? And what are those in your mind are sort of the first must-have skill sets that we would look for if we're looking internally, especially?
Yeah, for me, if I was looking across my team, I'm going to be looking at the people that are my data gurus. That they may be a recruiter or sourcer right now, but everything they do, they lead with data. So I know that they understand how to pull the data. They know how to understand how to interpret it and look at it, and they use data to tell their stories. So one, you want someone that's data minded. You want someone also who, you're going to have people on your team that they want to be the first to try the tools, first to learn about the tools, like how to make them work, and they use those. And so really looking for that analytical, data-driven person who's organized. Project management skills are a big, like a big priority, because you have to be organized and be able to create your roadmap. So things like that is what I would look for within my existing team, those skills and aptitudes that they currently show and their potentially previous background. James?
So,
oh, go ahead. Sorry,
Leah. So I heard data centric, innately curious, and rounded out your the way you said it. I would say innately curious, right? People who are extraordinarily organized. I had a person who used to work for me, and I used to joke that I am positive that her closet is color coded and alphabetized at the same time. And that's not because she's trying; it's just because it's who she was. Like she's just like organized to her bones person. So project manager. So I would say in project management, you also have a driver, right? People who are great project managers aren't just watching the list get checked off. They're driving.
That's right.
I think that is a skill set too. That is, it's just some people really have it, right? And you just want to find out. Sorry, James, you jump in. I was trying to round out what I was hearing.
No, I totally agree with both of you. The only thing I would add is sometimes you can also look outside of your team. So I have two people right now that are dedicated to RecOps. I have a leader and I have a senior specialist. Neither one of them came from recruiting. My leader she was an administrative assistant in our commercial real estate division at Sheets. But when I interviewed her, she was all those things you just mentioned. She was tech savvy, data driven. She had strong communication skills. She could influence people. And she was a great project manager because she was doing all the implementations of their systems and pulling all their data and doing all their continuous improvement projects. And so it was not exactly the popular decision to bring her on, but she hit the ground running and has done amazing things for us. So I'd encourage the group to look outside of recruiting as well.
Question. one of the things that I have seen a lot of recruiting ops teams own is end-to-end the process, but also compliance and data sort of structure and integrity. Do you think you're the right person as a rule follower? Are they somebody who likes and establishes sort of like meaningful rules? Or are they more of a rule breaker, people who want to push the boundaries and get everyone to try new things? That wasn't on the prep doc, so I didn't warn you guys about that question.
I can chime in on that one. So my RecOps leader also runs our compliance. So she leads the background check team, the legal reviews of all the issues, and we have a lot of them. Being a 700 store retailer that hires 20,000 plus people a year. So she is both a rule follower and an expansive thinker. So I think that's another depends answer. Because not every person comes to you with the same makeup. But I think what you have to look at is if that person is the driver that you were just talking about, Leah, but they don't have that expansive, ideation, thought process, then someone else on the team has to provide that. And so you just have to kind of look at the diversity of your team and make sure that someone is driving the shiny new toy syndrome, that your compliance person says, yeah, great idea, but it's not on the roadmap for the next 2 years or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's where too, like the right recruiting operations, lead, whether it's a director, a lead, an IC, they need to also really value process. So for me, being a recruiting professional, I can tend to say, you know what, let's just move fast and we'll figure that out later. So you want your recruiting ops person to make sure that they value not skipping steps, because as recruiters, sometimes we have the mindset of, we'll ask for forgiveness, and because we're trying to do things fast and move fast. And so it'll be key to have that person that does, value every step of the process, and to be your voice, to say, we know you want to do that, but it won't work. Like, this is something we need to, to stay in the process, or like James said, that's, on the roadmap 2 years from now, whatever that might be.
An interesting statement, right? Because a lot of times the list of requirements, especially if you're doing the first hire, this is not, you're like, oh, I can hire 5 people, and so I can hire a good mix of personalities and talents. You get one to start. The list of your wish list is definitely going to be longer than is a natural human being's set of skills, right? So sacrifices will have to be made. And I'm hearing, tell me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing you guys say basically, like, look at who's leading and who's driving the strategy and their natural talents, and who else is already involved that's going to be around this person. And let's start by filling the gaps, right? Let's fill the gaps of what we are not currently optimizing in our existing infrastructure and our people. One of the questions that was in the chat here that I want to pull forward is tool adoption, right? This is one of the many skills we're going to look for in a person that we bring in, because we have a set of tools already, and we may bring in more, and they're worthless if you don't adopt them. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're on their 3rd year of adoption of one particular tool that they have, and they're really excited to be 40% the way adopted on it. And I was like, okay, good luck. So how are we thinking about that? How do does that fit in this person's skill set? Is that something we actually go out to learning and development and say, we need your help to bring in for tool adoption? What's your thought on that?
I think
James.
It is. Go ahead, James.
I'm just picking people now.
That's okay. Nona, finish your thought there.
Oh, I think it is. I think, you have to have change management happening within that recruiting operations, and adoption comes along with that. And it's making sure that as you are implementing something, you're bringing everyone along on the journey. And everyone can also mean your partners and things like that. So it's transparency, it's education to the why this new tech is being put into place, the value that it's going to bring, getting a couple subject matter experts train, like do a train the trainer. So within the peer group, you have a couple people in the organization that can help champion this new tech and that, or what we consider a train the trainer. But I do think it's really important to have that because, recruiters as a whole, we get a lot of things thrown at us and things implemented, without a say. And so, trying to make sure we bring them along on the journey from the start, not just from when it's implemented, but from, hey, we're looking at these tools. We want a couple people to join us on the vetting team, and like getting everyone involved, at least from a transparency perspective, and then having your organization feel like that they've had a voice in the process will help increase adoption and embracing this new technology. There'll always be some people that are a little further behind, but that majority will help when they feel involved. James?
Yeah, I love this question because I think a lot of companies think of recruiting ops as the person that like puts things in place and does the implementation, which they should do. But for me, all the value is downstream. So we just implemented a new ATS back in September. And shortly before that, I brought on my second RecOps person with the specific goal for this person to optimize over the next however many years, a tech stack that included, an ATS, a CRM, a texting engine, a chat bot. So she has projects, for the next couple of years that are all around conversion rate optimization, tool utilization, training, expansion of products. This particular ATS vendor is going to be acquiring, smaller companies over time, probably in the AI space, maybe in the video interviewing space. And I need that person to take a look at and evaluate all of those tools to see if they fit, our objectives. And if so, help me as the leader make a decision to purchase or not purchase. And then how do we roll that out and, and gain adoption? So great question. Super important.
Yeah. And I think just one more to add, I would say to everyone on the podcast that, if you're running a TA organization and you're looking at new tools and systems and different things like that, bring your recruiting team along on that journey. And it may be as simple as, if you're having a meeting with Lever to look at an ATS, have one or two recruiters be part of that vetting team, because the recruiters will then all talk and they'll feel like you're not working in a silo to pick something that really doesn't work well for them using it every day. So I would say don't make decisions in a silo and bring your recruiters along on that journey.
That's a great point, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not your ops team or even your leadership using these tools, right?
That's right.
So there's nothing worse than to inherit a tool that you could have had a voice in. Now there are, we were talking as we were coming on, there's oftentimes no option. You are, congratulations. Right. You are the brand new owners of ORC and you're going to and here you go. But once you have sort of that main tech stack pieces, components that may come from IT, you may have actually had a voice in it. How you then work around it, what connects to it, and what infrastructure you add is much more in your control. And I do think you're right. Like, you have to have your organization's adoption. I would say, though, a thing to think about too is when you're talking to vendors, make sure they can articulate an adoption plan, right? I think that's one of the things that gets missed, especially when you're global, multilingual. If you have multiple currencies, that may play in. You have multiple global laws that you need to consider in regulation. I think that becomes extraordinarily important, that you're bringing people along who know those things, because you may not know all of it. It's a little too much to ask. I've asked this question before in other sessions I've done. I know I can see Ben Bear and Jeremy Lyons both on, who have absolutely been the victim of this question. So I want to ask you guys as well. Your first hire, what are the first things that they do? First 90 days, what are they doing? What are they spending their time on? And Ben and Jeremy, you guys can jump in too if you want and reframe previous answers.
Yeah, for me, I want them to go in and calibrate everything, get into the systems, do one-on-ones with the recruiting team, meet with the partners, really understand a day in the life of a recruiter, experiences from the business, even understanding what a new hire experience was like, really calibrate everything. It's not even calibrate, it's evaluate. I guess I shouldn't use calibrate. Is evaluate what the current state is, where do we need to be, and then work with me to put together an action plan based on their learnings. Because I think that first 30, 60 days, that person has to really jump in and learn of what's working well and what's not. And then how do we solve for gaps? How do we prepare to change something completely turned upside down in the timelines? But it's that listening tour that's really, really important, and that looking at the data and all the outcomes. James?
Yeah, 100% agree. And the only add I would make there is in the first 90 days, try to pick something high impact, low effort that this person can do as a project and complete, so they can not only get some confidence in themselves that they can make an impact on the team, but also show the business that it was the right decision to bring someone on. And here, look how quickly this person provided value.
Yeah. And I think to add to James's as well is have a good onboarding plan for that person. Like, be very specific in onboarding, what you expect in the first 2 weeks, who you want them to meet with. Like, put together a Google Doc where they really just know, okay, here are the important stakeholders to meet with. Like, have a really succinct onboarding plan that will help guide them as well. And they'll understand what their outcomes are for each area that you've written out for them. But an onboarding plan is so important and documented, not just verbally.
I think Jeremy wants to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to just jump in and also quickly point out something. I think one of the more interesting aspects between a RecOps person coming in and a recruiter coming in is that when the RecOps person is even interviewing, that's actually where their first 90 days can start, because they're going to see things in the process. They're going to see things in how things moved, how things were articulated, that they can immediately come in and say, hey, you guys did XYZ really great. I've never seen this before. That was really cool. But here are some areas of improvement. And to, James's point, that can be really high impact, low effort. And most RecOps people, when they start interviewing, are already thinking, okay, we know the game that's being played. So now where can we sort of make changes to more innovate things quickly?
Interesting is one of the things we didn't talk about when we were talking about pushback earlier is that your recruiting team could push back, because this is a person who might start to enforce rules, might start to ask you to do things you weren't previously doing that you don't want to do. And I think I heard last time, Jeremy and Ben, when we spoke, you guys say, listen to the recruiters, ask them, find some quick hit wins from the recruiting team that you can push out just as you're sort of thinking about your relationships going forward, and how do you almost build a bank account, favors that you may need to trade later with that particular team. Ben is jumping in with those first few months are gold for eliciting feedback and improvement ideas. Did you guys have more you wanted to jump in on that, or should I finish out with our last question? I'll jump into the last question. Last question. Sorry, my audio is cutting off a little bit, so I apologize. What are the tools that are most essential for those first, let's call it year, for your new person? You've just brought on RecOps, TA ops, hiring ops, whatever you want to call it. What tools do they need to be successful?
I'm gonna give a snarky response. A spreadsheet.
Always. That's not snarky. That's
Snarky
doing business
/
right there.
also truth bomb.
Yeah. So I just generally believe that, a RecOps person or RecOps practitioner should be highly focused around a list of problems, a list of projects, and an ability to prioritize those things in a certain way. And you can do that on a spreadsheet. And furthermore, that spreadsheet can also turn into a project charter and a project plan, for a specific project that, that you're working on. At Sheets, we use Smartsheet for everything.
Yeah.
And so, so I would encourage people to try to use the things that the business uses as well. And if you need to bring in a project management tool, I use Trello and some other things as well, just to keep track of my technology selection process. But usually a spreadsheet or some sort of spreadsheet software can do a lot of damage in that first year.
Yeah, exactly. I would say access. So it's not really a tool, but it's making sure that they have access to the recruiting team, the business leaders, the partners, like introductions, and making sure that they feel like they're getting connected with the right people. So that access to the right people is going to be critical for them in their first 90 days. Some companies, that's very easy because it's small. Others, like an Amazon, there's a lot of introductions that has to happen and a lot of teams to be introduced to, and also paving the way for them as well. So other teams don't feel like, what are you doing here? Why are you in my space? Or I feel like you're poaching on my space. So making sure that, they have access to all the right people, organizations to be successful and do their listening tour and gather feedback and make their 90 days, feel like they're already adding value
Jeremy,
by
do you
being
wanna
there.
jump in too? Sorry, Jeremy, did you want to jump back in? I lost you. And he's gone. Sorry about that. My audio has decided to be really wonky. It's always a fun time. I laughed a little bit when you said Access, Nona, because Microsoft used to have a product called
I know
Access.
they did. I had to hurry quickly. I was like, oh wait, I need to
that's
quickly
what she-
verify.
I know
Yeah.
that's what she means. We don't need that, everybody.
No,
But,
we don't.
I was curious, because what you guys didn't say was access to a data lake or access to things like Domo or some of these BI tools, which is interesting, right? Because I would have thought that would have been one of the first things that you would be thinking about.
Don't
No?
disagree. I don't disagree with that. I was just thinking a little more that would be a little bit more downstream. Lots and lots of tools out there that that a RecOps person will have to have and know and use. But to me, at the very basic, the core is just something to track projects.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Any parting thoughts before I round us out?
Yeah, I think just for me, recruiting operations is needed. Like I said earlier, it's the backbone. I feel it's a backbone of TA. For me, data is, king and queen, and I need a good recruiting ops function to help me tell our story, to help the recruiters understand what success looks like. So I know it can be a hard conversation to get investment and things like that, but I think be fearless and be prepared would be the two things that I recommend. And thanks, Leah, for having me today.
Thanks for joining, James.
Yeah, for me, just kudos to you all for having this forum, and some of the people on this call that I recognize and I consume their content. This is a topic that's still in its very early days, and it's going to take a community of people to understand it, translate it, for the business. And my goal, it's not really my goal because I don't work on this day in and day out, but my dream is that there's a recruiting ops leader in every company, kind of everywhere in the world, because there's still a lot of functions out there that have broken pieces, some that are completely broken, and the candidate at the end of the day suffers, the hiring manager suffers, and it just, we need to fix recruiting. And I think this topic of RecOps can help do that.
Totally agree. thank you all for joining us today. Next month, we are going to have Melissa Thompson. She is the global talent leader at Ford Motor Company. She's joining us. She is spicy. I think you guys will really like her. She's talking about her approach to continuous process improvement, which is a Kaizen method. And we're going to do a case study on her college and university hiring team that was about 30,000 applicants behind. And now we're working on fixing that problem for her. So she is really interesting and exciting. So please join us. It's going to be on July 18th, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And we will send out the invite later today or tomorrow. So thank you all for joining.
Another episode of RecTech is in the books. Follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com, where you can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. RecTech Media helps keep employers and recruiters up to date through our podcasts, webinars, and articles. So be sure to check out our other sites, recruiting headlines, and HR podcasters to stay on top of recruiting industry trends. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon on the next episode of RecTech, the Recruiting Technology Podcast.